Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL to get 5% off of your sale. And then also by Coalesce Apparel, where you can get really cool t-shirts and stuff, and use the code Casual Magic to get 10% off your sale. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't really sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them. And now, on to the show. Welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Coalesce Apparel, Cool Stuff Inc., and Architect. Today, I have a really interesting episode. Returning guest, Spike Feeders member Alex has come by today to share with me one of the coolest things I saw actually this past summer, which was when we were in Richmond. I saw that he was playing a deck, and it had one of my favorite cards of all time, Assemble the Legion, in it. And I was like, oh, I love that card. It's like my pet card. I didn't know anybody else played it. Who's your commander? Oh, it's Assemble the Legion. And I'm like, come again? And so I needed to know. And it turns out my man has built a whole Rule Zero deck where the actual commander is Assemble the Legion. And with some of his buddies, who folks we know from the Spike Feeders, they've all built this whole like coterie of just like, what if we built these other things as commanders? What would happen? And so because that idea is so fascinating to me, I wanted to re-welcome Alex to my show so that we could sit and actually just talk about what does it mean to build the most off-kilter commander deck? How do you sell it to people? And then how do you actually go about doing this? Hey, Alex, how's it going?
Oh, I'm fantastic, Shivam. How are you today?
Man, I'm super jazzed. Assemble the Legion, literally the reason I like when I think about my pet soldiers deck, the reason it exists is because of two cards. One is Kaldoran Outpost, which is obviously my favorite card of all time.
Yep.
And two is because when I went to one of my first pre-releases when I came back, Gate Crash, my rare was Assemble the Legion. And I was like, this is a card that just churns out geometric numbers of soldiers every turn. And it was the best card ever. Mind you, and the saddest story of all time. The first time I got it into play, I was so stoked. And the very next turn, the dude put out a black enchantment that globally gives every creature -1/-1.
Oh,
so literally my
geez.
soldiers would walk out of the barracks into the muster and die.
Gosh. Nothing like getting Elish Norned when you're trying to
And
build
I'm
up your
just like,
reserves.
"No, this is my card. I've been working. I wanted it to work." It was the saddest day. But then I discovered Dragon's Base came out and I got Tajik and I was able to say, like, oh, I could put Kaldoran Outpost and Assemble the Legion into a deck. I built this deck and people are like, so you need to take Assemble out. It does nothing. And I'm like, you need to take your tongue out.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because this is the reason the deck exists.
In this house, we respect Assemble the Legion.
We don't, yeah. This is the house we live in, is the Legion, right?
Yeah, like, exactly.
This deck is being assembled for said Legion. So I needed to know, because that is an idea that if I had thought about, I would have done a million years ago, because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Or like put Kaldoran Outpost, like I keep telling people, like, my secret commander is actually Kaldoran Outpost, because that's the card I want. That's a card in the center of the deck. The idea of putting it in the command zone. So walk me through this. How do you, Mr. Spike Feeder, Mr. CDHer, get around to, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stick a 5 casting cost Boros enchantment into my command zone and then build a creatureless deck around it.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Basically what happened was back when I first started planning the deck out, I had been sort of struggling for quite a bit of time. I remember mentioning last time I was on that, it's a bit of a struggle for me to really understand and grok casual Magic deck building, at least as it comes to Commander. And so one of the things that I just wanted to try and do was give myself additional restrictions. But I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it something that I would want to reach for and play, that wasn't just, oh, well, here's my bad deck that I can play with bad decks. Like, that's not the right energy, and that's not what I wanted to, exactly. That's not what I wanted to put in the room. And so instead, what I did was I looked around and I thought, what's my favorite card that I would love to have available to me anytime? because that's really the central conceit of Commander. But I don't
Mm,
really identify with my commanders that much. It's never been something that I'm like, oh, I really love this commander. I really love this character. It's always been more about effects for me. I like, oh, I can't remember what the opposite of the Vorthos is.
a Mel.
Mel, that's right. So at heart, I'm a Mel. I love design. I love what cards do. I love how they interact with each other. I love what you can do with the different cards that have come out. And really, Assemble the Legion is unique because I think it, as far as I'm aware, is the only card that grows as you leave it alone in this specific way. It
Mm,
floods the board. It keeps things getting bigger and
yes.
bigger. It
It
says,
is
you must answer me
it
or
is
I'll
to
wipe you
me
out.
the iconic idea of what red and white do together,
Yes.
which is we've put out a ton of hasty, flooded little dudes who just spread out, go wide. Boros go wide is like one of the it's as classic as, blue white flyers, right?
Yep.
Like it is just an iconic to me, that is one of the like Assemble the Legion's a perfect design as far as I'm concerned. It hits exactly what the flavor is. It hits a perfect design note. It's like a perfect cross between Vorthos and Mel in terms of
Mhm.
like the design is elegant and gorgeous. The flavor is on point. It is exactly what that color combo wants to do,
Yeah.
right?
It just felt right. It played right, and basically, once I had that core of that idea put together, and I got to sit down and really say, okay, I'm gonna let myself do this. I think this is something I could, make other people enjoy as well. I had to sit down and start thinking about how to do that. And what I kept coming to is the creatures that you could put into such a deck to
Mm.
support it were way too good. You get
Mhm.
extra tokens, you get extra bodies, you get extra power, you get soldier synergies, and all of a sudden you're
Playing my
looking at a
deck.
f oh, exactly. You end up with a deck that's a little higher than I was trying to aim, so then I said to myself, "Well, why? Why don't I just not play creatures? I've already got all the creatures I could want in the command zone. What if I just supplement with a bunch of sorceries that make creatures tokens,
Mm,
stuff like Hordling Outburst, stuff like
mm.
Raise the Alarm,
Good
pieces that
classic.
exactly,
Do
just
you have timely
one-off effects.
reinforcement in there?
I do have timely
One of my
reinforcements in here.
favorites.
Actually, one of my favorite cards in the deck that I've discovered just through playing it. I was playing just a house game the other night, and Call the Coppercoats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they printed that card, I just cheered because I was like, "This is the card that my soldiers deck has desperately wanted, and is
Hmm.
one of the most, perfect, like, soldier designs ever."
Oh.
Uh, do you have a handy? Can you read it to the people?
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to. Call of the Coppercoats is 2 and a white for an instant with Strive. Strive being this spell costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target opponents. Create X11 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. So basically,
So
just
good.
boom, extra creatures equal to how threatening the most threatening person is, or the
Because
most threatening to people, or
you
everybody.
know, any year before this one, that card would have said, "Choose any number of target opponents. Create 1 soldier for each opponent."
Exactly. But no, they got to Ikoria and they just said, let's just go for it. Let's
Yeah, and
just.
they're like, "What if we actually just gave you enough?"
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh my god." I have blown people out with this so many times.
It's so good, isn't it?
It's so
Because
perfect.
it's especially handy in this type of deck because you run into a lot more token strategies I've found playing at this sort of vibe,
Tier.
right?
Yeah.
And so being able to have it, because one of the other things I did with the deck is I very intentionally limited my removal options. I don't think I have a wrath other than Martial Coup in the
One of my
deck.
favorite cards.
Yeah, I've got very limited amounts of directed interaction. I think the best piece is actually Spear of Heliod, which requires people to poke me with their creature for me to blow it up.
Mhm.
So again, just trying to find ways to keep myself in the spot where I want to be was just saying I'm not going to run staples. I'm going to try and keep my budget fairly low. I want to keep it under $200 US.
Mm.
And
Have you
over a
thought
month
about,
ago, it's
Hour of Reckoning?
ooh, I don't know that I have
Hour of
actually.
Reckoning, for those of you who don't know at home, is the 4 and 3 white, so 7 mana, Convoke sorcery. So it's got Convoke, which is handy. And it says destroy all non-token creatures, which is if you're playing a
Oh.
fully token-based like soldiers deck where every creature in there is just a 1/1 jankling from any number of random red or white sorceries,
Yeah.
tapping them all together to cast a wrath that will keep only your friend alive because you've
Mhm.
got no creatures to worry about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just
That
saying this is
ah,
like,
mm,
and it costs like a quarter.
that's kinda tempting. Ooh, I might actually cut Devout Invocation for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's
Hour of
really
Reckoning
good.
doesn't have a lot of homes, but I
Yeah.
think you have one.
I would say I literally have nothing that doesn't, sorry, have nothing that gets hit by that, so that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's way better than Divine Reckoning, man.
Yeah.
Divine
Uh,
Reckoning is it's not my favorite wrath of all time, let's say.
yeah, exactly. But in any case,
Yeah.
so we put the deck together, we stuffed it full of anthems, we stuffed it full of some bad anthems, and, that's just how it goes, and actually, what I found with it is it's so much fun to pilot, because I
I believe
approach
it.
it not like it's supposed to be this well-oiled machine that's been crafted out of, like, an F1 racer with tons of German engineering and thousands of years of experience in how to build a deck. It's just my favorite cards put together with some defined restrictions that let me have fun with it.
Why like, how what made you take that leap into being like, "I'm just gonna put this in the command zone?"
Really, I was just me constantly seeing people say untrusted play can't work. You can't ever use rule 0. No one would ever let you do X. And I thought to myself, I bet I could get people to let me do X. I bet I could put together a deck that's, fun enough, sounds interesting enough, has a decent enough hook to draw in my opponents, even if I don't know them personally. And what I found was it absolutely does.
Yeah,
When you
what's the
lock
reception been like? What do people say when you sit down and be like, "Yo, I've got this random rule 0 deck?"
Yeah, people get curious, honestly, when you say, "Hey, I've got an interesting Rule Zero deck." Because I don't say it's a good Rule Zero deck, because
Mm.
honestly, it's not super powerful. It's not, top of casual. It's not nitro casual. It's thoroughly casual. It folds
No,
to
this
3
is
wraths, right?
definitely like kitchen table, man.
Exactly, exactly. And so what I say is, I say, "Okay, I've got Assemble the Legion," if you're familiar with it, and I'll usually pull it out at that point, let folks read it. That goes in the command zone, and I have no other creatures in this deck, and that usually hooks people.
I'm looking at this list right now because I pulled it up and I'm just
Yeah,
like, "God, this really is just like a list of my favorite cards of all time."
yeah. Is
Like
it?
like, you've got freaking Release of Dogs, you've got Servo
Mhm.
Expedition, you've got Krenko's Heroic Reinf all these cards that have been draft heroes for me that I've
Yeah,
always wanted to find a place to put into a EDH deck. Outlaws Merriment, one of my favorite cards.
yeah. One thing I think you'll love if you wanna go look at it, it's Promise of Bunray.
Promise of Bunray is a cool card.
Oh my gosh.
This
Just
one is an enchantment for 3 and a white, 2 and a white. I think it's from like Kamigawa 3. Um, it's whenever a creature, it's an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control dies, sacrifice Promise of Bunray. If you do, create 4 1/1 colorless creatures. So what you're doing is you've got all these chumpy little like tokens. You pop them and get 4.
yep, it's
Or if
great.
you, do you have tell me you have the oh, you don't.
I
You
might not,
didn't
no.
put the Anointed Procession.
No, no, I very specifically did not put Anointed Procession in.
Oh,
It
that's a
w
choice.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing is I actually found just in play testing it on Moxfield,
Hmm.
sorry, I actually found just play testing it on my decklist site that,
It's
there
okay. You can say Moxfield. That's fine.
well, I just know your sponsors. Anyway, um, that anytime I got Anointed Procession out, I went from 0 to overwhelming threat, basically the next turn.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. Because once you've got like a couple of tokens on Assemble the Legion, suddenly Anointed Procession becomes real stupid real fast.
Exactly. And it just sort of felt against the spirit of what I was trying to do because, again, I was trying to lock myself into, in many ways, lock myself into a few delineated types of effects, right?
Hmm.
I wasn't trying to go and find all the best things to make this work as a holistic deck. I was trying to say, can this deck work if I only put in instants and sorceries that make tokens? Can this deck work if I only put in anthems? Can this deck work if I only put in little pieces of, just fun stuff like Promise of Bunray? Actually, one that came up at Richmond was Goblin Assault. And this is something that I did not expect building the deck, but it turns out against our good friend Hobbs, who plays goblin decks all day, every day, the text on Goblin Assault that says "Goblin creatures attack each turn if able" is stacks, and I lost my mind at that because that wasn't intentional on
Oh,
my
I
part
can't
at
laugh,
all.
I'm gonna wake my son up, but,
Yeah,
oh my god. Play that is like that is just like you can't defend. Suddenly all of his dudes
nope.
just have to grind into yours. Oh, that's so
Exactly, and
gross.
so you put this deck up against a Krenko list, and all of a sudden, yeah, oops, I guess I am affecting your
Krenko's
board.
tears, baby. But I'm
Yeah.
just looking at this list and it's like, God, you know what makes me mad? Like, I could have done this the whole time because 'cause I'm looking at this. Every single one of these cards is a card that I have looked at for EDH and said, "You know what? I can't play it because it's too weak or it's not doing the thing or it's in my soldier's deck." But it's just like, I love these cards. I love all of these cards. And
Mhm.
this is everything I want to be doing in Magic is just putting out anthems and putting out tokens and
Yeah,
like Luminarch Ascension for God's sakes,
yeah,
Leyline of the Meek.
yeah.
I see you added wedding announcement, but Paladin
Mhm.
class, man. I love
Yeah,
Paladin class.
isn't it
Omen
great?
of the Sun, one of my favorite cards from Theros.
Yep.
Friggin' oh man, I love this deck so much. This is everything I want.
Yeah,
Like
it's been my favorite deck to play now for months. I've actually had to stop like asking to play it on occasion because I just want to play it. It fulfills me in a way that I didn't really
like
expect Magic to anymore.
It's
Since I've sort of
weird,
yeah,
but this feels more like the Soldier's deck that I dreamed about making than the Soldier's deck that I have.
that's fair. Yeah,
Like, you have Captain's Claw.
yeah.
I love Captain's Claw. That card is sucks,
It's it,
but
it,
it's
it's
so
it's one of
good.
my favorites. I actually the reason Captain's Claw is in is it's one of the few things that I knew about that could consistently generate a token on attack because I used to have it in this really bad Nahiri the Harbinger deck that was
Mm,
all based around tutoring up Skull Clamp and getting advantage that way.
mm.
But anyway,
There's no
that was
clamp in this deck.
exactly because again, what happens then? The game becomes about Skull Clamp. I don't want the game to be about Skull Clamp. I want the game to be about me deciding who to send my gigantic army at. That's
Oh
what I want the
god.
whole game to be about.
I'm gonna build this deck. I hope you don't mind, but
No, please do. Please
I'm going
do.
to build the hell out of this because oh god, look at this. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. Wow, I've never seen entrapment maneuver before.
Oh, you
That
haven't?
card no, how do I not have that? That seems perfect for
I see
my
that seems exactly up your alley.
yeah, like, how have I never heard of this card before?
No.
Wow,
Yeah,
this is sick.
nothing like, "I'm gonna attack you with Blightsteel. Great, I have 11 blockers now, thank you."
Yeah, so entrapment maneuver is an instant for 3 and a white that says, target player sacks an attacking creature. You create X/1/1 white soldier creatures where X is a creature's toughness. So it's swords to more swords.
Yeah. So we've actually, been filming with this deck, quite a bit. We put 3 games in the tank, we've released 2 of them now. I think probably by the time this comes out, we'll probably have the 3rd available to the public as well, and in the 3rd one, spoilers for, I guess, exclusively you, Shivam, um, I just get off to the most insane start. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and I draw directly into Divine Visitation.
Mm. Mm.
Just
Mm,
ooh,
mm, mm.
ooh, it felt good. And you can just watch as the game goes along because it's still a very competitive game. I think the whole runtime on it, even cut down, was still almost 50 minutes. But I had such a commanding presence. I don't think I got touched the entire game because I had blockers for days. And just the whole thing was all of my friends trying to overcome my overwhelming army that kept building and
Oh god.
building and
And
building.
there's nothing in here that is, like, scary unto itself.
No, exactly.
Everything in here is just, like, bulk bin beauty that's,
Mhm.
like, it's fine, but they all just synergize and they link up and they end up like a legion, just being a bunch of phalanx shields blocking together, and you're like,
Yeah.
"This is gross."
Yeah. The few times I've actually won with the deck, the thing I've found consistently that happens is I get both Assemble the Legion to stick
Mm,
and several anthems.
mm.
Because once you start getting that built up, having a 4/4 come out every turn is just nuts. And having
Yeah, and I
four
s
of
I
them come
see
out,
that you
yeah.
very smartly left Cathar's Crusade off. I love that card, but
Hmm.
I'm surprised you don't have Keldorn Outpost, though.
Honestly, it's just one of those pieces that I've never really been a huge fan of.
Mhm.
Um,
That's fair.
it's good enough that I acknowledge that it's interesting and it does what you want it to do, but it wasn't what I was looking to do, right?
My pet cards don't have to be your pet cards. I
Yeah, exactly,
understand.
exactly. But any case, how I ended up with this and how it's gone in terms of reaction has it surprised the heck out of me because for a long time I've been kind of a proponent of the idea that Commander functions best as sort of an umbrella and you can kind of make it
Mhm,
what you want it to be. You just have to be clear about either what you're doing or what you're doing as a group with your friends, right?
mm.
And what we found is when I came back from Richmond and I said, "Wow, that was so much fun. We need to do this for the channel. We need to put this together. What do you guys want to do?" And well, Jim already had his quote unquote casual Flash Hulk deck, right? So that was an easy dunk, right?
Mhm,
And my good friend Jerry, he's always been obsessed with Battlewits. It's sort of his white whale of Commander, but obviously it doesn't work in normal Commander because you can only have 100 cards. Well, if we're breaking all the rules, why not break that one? So that one
mm.
happened. And then last but not least, Jim comes up and he says, "You know what'd be really cool is if Ozolith was a Demir creature."
Demir?
Yeah, he settled on Demir for Voltron Ozolith.
There are 4 words in that sentence.
Yeah,
3 words in that sentence that just Demir Voltron. First off, what?
yeah, right,
Demir
right,
Ozolith. What?
right.
Ozolith is like counters and stuff. What counters are you saving in Demir?
Exactly. Well, that's just it. He has stuff like Crystalline Giant in
Oh,
it.
for God's
He's got
sakes.
stuff like is it a Neurophage? I think is the name of it.
Oh, yeah, the
Um,
weird it's like, um, AE something.
yeah,
Uh,
I can't remember it off the top of my head. I don't want to click too much here. Uh, but basically, he just
ONE, Oneirophage.
yeah.
The squid illusion that gets a 1/1 every time you draw a card.
Exactly. And so there's actually just tons of stuff like that. In one of the gameplay episodes we had, he got out some artifact whose name completely escapes me, but you add counters to it equal to the CMC of instants and sorceries that are cast. And then you can tap it to make a fractal with that many counters on it.
Whoa.
And so you play that into my deck full of instants and sorceries is how I make my engine run. And all of a sudden, I think he made like a 35-35 in one of the games that we filmed. It's absolutely nuts. But that's the kind of stuff you get into when you stop looking at how do I optimize this deck to do the best thing that it does and start limiting yourself and start using things that are not really there to be there, if that makes sense. And so he said at one point, I think in an episode that we talked about this,
It's Geometric Nexus, by the way.
geometric nexus. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that card is weird.
yeah, very weird, right? He talked about how he considered other color identities for it. You know, maybe it's red white, maybe it's green white, right, for the counters.
Sure.
But he ended up going with blue black because actually surprisingly there's a lot of good Voltron stuff in blue black. It's actually one of the reasons why I think Ramses might actually have a shot at being a fairly high power commander overall. That's Ramses the Assassin Lord that just came out in Damu, is
Yeah,
that
the
right?
new Ramses.
Yeah, new Ramses. Yeah, and
Mhm.
old Ramses not so good. New Ramses decent.
You know, old Ramses has wrecked my Enchantress deck before.
Really?
Yeah, because I play a lot of auras-based decks,
Okay, sure.
and it turns out
Yeah.
Ramses Overdark just taps to destroy target enchanted creature,
Yeah,
and I'm
that'll
like,
do it.
And if you've got friggin' Spear of, or if you've got what the hell, Spear of Heliod? Not Spear of Heliod, the one that removes Shadow Spear. If you got
Yeah.
Shadow Spear and you take off Hexproof, and suddenly you can just tap your dude and kill my, and I'm like, that that feels unfair,
Yeah, that's some
but
niche utility.
also, uh, you beat me with Ramses Overdark. I cannot.
Yeah.
I mean, good on you, man.
Wow. That's some very niche interaction, but
You
I
know
like
what?
it a lot.
Sometimes one of the joys of Commander is sometimes you find the one person who's just got one random pet card that is just
Mhm.
going to turn off your
Yeah.
deck,
Oh, that's great.
and it's so dumb. And you're like, and they're like, "Yeah, man, I just have it because I've loved this art since I was, in grade
Right.
school,
Yeah.
and this is the first time in 30 years it's done anything, and it just wrecked you." And I'm like,
Mhm.
it sure did.
It's sort of like how I keep looking for a place to put Stern Judge and never ever find a place to put Stern Judge.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards that are, I should do an episode on that of just like cards that are just sitting on my desk that I stare at and say, Someday, my friend, someday your home will come.
We'll find something that synergizes you with you, I promise.
There's 30,000 cards. One of them is yours.
There you
Um,
go.
so if you were going like, man, this is exactly the kind of jam I want. This is what I want out of Commander.
Mhm,
This is exactly like because you're playing bargain basement, like bulk bin cards that are just beloved for you. They're cards that are
mhm,
maybe draft champions or just like amazingly cool but super niche and didn't do anything. Uh, and you've given them a home and you've given them a level to stand at where they're not going to just get you pushed off the table, but also not going to walk over the table.
yeah.
And in doing so, you've created like a new kind of expression of how can I just chill and have fun with my favorite cards and not be a psychopath or be like a
Mhm,
marshmallow, right? Like,
exactly.
I love that. I love everything about this.
Well, and actually, in a lot of ways, I actually do kind of scratch my spike itch with this because what I've done is I've constrained myself so much by saying I'm going to use this rule zero. I'm going to use only these cards that fit in this kind of thing. It is almost literally three Scryfall Oracle text searches in a trench coat,
Mhm.
right?
Sure
It,
is.
it, it doesn't have a lot of variety to it. My cards all go in the same way. And I've actually used that to build other non-rule zero decks that kind of fall in the same place.
I think there's a hidden nature of spikiness in theme locking yourself like that, that
Hmm.
I think a lot of people don't, give credence to,
Yeah.
or unfairly don't give credence to, like, because for instance, people will be like, "Oh man, look, Shivam, here's a great Boros card for your soldier deck." I'm like, but it's a warrior. That is not going in
Hmm.
my soldiers deck. I have a theme that is locked in place. It doesn't matter how good the card. It could be the greatest card ever for my deck. If it is not specifically on theme, which is like all soldiers, one cleric because every army needs to have a medic, and a
Hmm.
couple of angels to lead the way as generals. That is like my deck has got flavor like rabble rousing. You've got that in your deck, and it's one of
Yeah.
the best new cards to come out for this type of theme. And I struggled hard to put that into my deck because I'm like, this doesn't make soldiers. It doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't do the thing. And I was like, okay, well, what is? How can I? I had to basically sit and write an essay to myself, explaining how can I justify this within my theme, and that is like a very spiky way to build.
Yeah.
It's not spiky in that I'm maximizing for power level, but it's spiky Vorthos. I'm
Exactly.
maximizing for theme.
Yeah.
And
And yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think in the same way, I've maximized for my Mel in having all these blockers and these considerations put around me for the types of effects I'm going to allow.
actually, you're right. I think that's more of a than a Vorthos thing. Well,
Yeah.
maybe it's both. Maybe it's
Well,
both.
I
But
think for the way you're talking about it, it's absolutely Vorthos,
yeah,
and the way I've gone through it, it's definitely Mel.
yeah.
Just to give you a counter example that's not Rule Zero, I've got this Kelsey the Plague deck,
Hmm.
and that is literally learned what I learned from building Assemble the Legion and applied it to a non-Rule Zero deck. And so if I go into my Scryfall tags or my tags here on the deck builder, it's Death Dutch granting things,
Hmm.
equipment tutors, creatures with exalted, and creatures that ping.
Oh, I love every sentence in there.
Right, and that's all it is. I think I've got 10 pieces of protection slash ramp, and everything else is in one of those themes that I mentioned. Again, love to play the deck. Very fair, very balanced. Doesn't overwhelm tables, but it allows me to control the game in a way that it's fun.
What a
It lets
cool
me,
deck.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this deck list and I'm just like,
yeah,
wow, this is sweet, man. Like,
yeah,
okay,
and
so
mhm.
yeah, I'm sorry, go finish your thought. And
Oh
I
yeah,
got a
and
question
so,
later.
but what I've found is that there's this really weird click in my brain, and I'm sure it's clicking in some other people's brains, that if you just go on Scryfall and you type in O colon open statement, here's some rules text, and just start slamming in examples of the same thing over and over without trying to go for your staples, without trying to go for the best and most powerful options that exist, and really resisting the urge to put in things like tutors unless they are a core component of what you're doing,
Yes.
you end up with not only an exceedingly casual deck that it works at the vast majority of tables, but also one that's extremely fun to play because you are always getting to do the thing you want to do. This Kelsian deck lets me ping people to death every time I
Okay,
play it.
so first off, that idea that you just said right there is how I build decks, right?
Mhm.
Like I've always built decks by like I'm building, let's say, Grim Grid, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm gonna go build zombie tribal. Let me go find the coolest zombies I can. They're all in there. I mean, it's very linear, very zombie. It's also very fun. But
Yeah.
like when I built my Mazzy deck, which is my auras deck, I was like, I want to build it different from my enchantress deck. So I'm not putting in all the token standard enchantresses that draw me a million cards. I'm like, what is the idea theme of this deck? Is I want to put auras and stuff on your things and encourage you to attack other people. So I literally went through and I got all the auras that benefit only attaching to opponent's creatures, or like prompting you to attack someone else or goading or whatever. And in doing so I built a deck that's not the strongest enchantress deck you can ever build, but does exactly the thing I want to be doing and makes me happy to play. And hearing you encapsulate this is just like so both rewarding to me, and also like I can't believe I never thought about how I actually deck build. Like that is such a perfect box that I live in, which is I take a theme or I take an idea, I limit, like when I built my treasures deck, my Mardu treasures deck, you can build it in super busted ways.
Mhm.
And I was like, what do I want? I want to have like all these random dice rolling treasure guys from Forgotten Realms in one box. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, it's got Dockside in there, but that's because it's a treasure theme deck, and of course
Yeah.
Dockside's gonna be there. Um, but it's just like building to building to a lockdown idea of like these are the cards I want to use, no better, no worse. Just like, and like people will come to me like, how do you not have like like you'll see posts on Twitter where folks are like, oh, what cards do you always reach for to put into your deck first? And I'm like, nothing. Like,
Yeah, like
I
Soul
think
Ring, I guess.
maybe Rogue's Passage is the card that I'll reach.
There you go.
You know, like Soul Ring, sure, maybe, but even my like not every deck I have has Soul Ring. I love it, but I don't need it. But
Mhm.
it's just like because all my decks are so rigidly locked to theme or to idea or to concept that you can't just have a staple collection of auto ink. Like when I talked to my CDH friends who were building, they're like, yeah, so my deck is like 40 cards because the other 60 are basically already
Yeah.
pre-generated packets that I just add in. And I'm like, that's neat that you can just do it so quickly. But I'm like, I can't imagine playing the same X number of cards in every deck because they're
Right.
value piles. They're not telling a story.
Exactly. They're not looking for the expression of their creativity. They're looking for consistency and getting
Yeah,
the
like, and
gameplay result.
that's
Yeah.
fine. You've got a goal.
Yeah.
You're building to your goal. Rock
Yeah.
on. I'm not gonna like I'm not passing judgment on the goal
Oh yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
the action. That's why these things exist.
Yeah.
But that's not what I want. What I want is what you did, which is I'm going to build the king of all pingers. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that is such a sick idea. That is such a like of course you're gonna have Basilisk. Like what happened if I built Basilisk Color dot deck? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's what you basically did here.
Yeah.
So my question to you that I was going to ask before I went down this tangent is you mentioned 3 things. You mentioned Death Touch, you mentioned Pingers, and then you mentioned Exalted. Why
Mhm.
Exalted? Exalted is one of my favorite mechanics. No, it is my favorite mechanic of all time.
Mhm. So,
But
Strange Bedfellows, also my favorite mechanic of all time. Um, Part of it is when I first started looking at this deck, I realized how gross it could get with me being able to both lock down the board and potentially get a lot of creatures out.
mm,
So what I said to myself was, depending on where I'm at and depending on what I hear the other people say, what I hear them talk about, the sort of statements they make in our Rule Zero conversation, one of the things I might offer the table is that I will only attack you with Kelsian so long as you do not cross me. And it lets me play the villain a little bit because honestly, I like doing that. I like
sure,
being the threat. I like being the person who needs to be taken out for the game to win. It's good TV, and B, I feel like I can do a good job playing that guy.
sure.
And so the Exalted sub package was to take out some of the other creatures that existed in the first draft of this deck that were a
Mm.
little more aggressive, that took advantage of the fact that the gates were open. You know, at first, this deck had a master. Is it Master of Cruelties that puts people to
Oh
one life
yeah.
when he attacks?
Hmm.
Dirty, dirty stuff like that. Because then, oh, I ping you, I win, great. And so what I did was I said, well, why don't I just get that out of here and just stuff it full of all these, 25-cent exalted creatures? Because
Mm.
then instead of attacking for 4 with my Kelsian, I'll attack for 6. And so not
Mm.
only do you have to make a decision about you blocking my Kelsien, I have to make the decision about whether I want to tap Kelsien to get the experience counter now from the blocked creature that I'm probably killing, or later to remove a new threat that comes down. It
So,
makes the yeah.
yeah, for those of you at home, Calcian is a Mardu commander, so red, white, and black. And human assassin 2/2, vigilance haste. It gets 1/1 +1/+1 for each experience counter you have. And tap Calcium deals damage to target creature you don't control. When it dies this turn, you get an experience counter, thus the need for death touch.
Hmm.
And this thing just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then just swings in for good old commander damage lethal.
Yeah, it's great. I very rarely win with the deck because it doesn't have great finishing power,
Oh
but I
man, Mage Right
consistently,
Stone. What a
yeah,
perfect card for this deck.
yes,
Oh, oh.
uh, it's one of those things that again I've never found a home for it that really felt good, and it feels so good to have a Mage Right Stone in this deck.
Have you
It's
thought about
absolutely insane.
Viridian Longbow?
Viridian Longbow. I don't know if I know that one.
A Viridian Longbow is basically, I think you would like it a lot.
Viridian
Uh,
Longbow. Okay, let's take a
Viridian
look.
Longbow is a one casting cost equipment that says equipped creature has tap. This creature deals 1 damage to any target.
Ooh, that is very tempting.
It's in my
Yeah.
Hapatra deck for that
Ooh,
same
yeah.
kind of reason of like, oh, I put a whole bunch of neg 1 neg 1s where I've got like all my death touch snakes,
Hmm.
and I just go and machine gun people by like tap my snake, do a damage, and unequip, re-equip, tap my snake, do a damage, and
Yeah.
just start like mowing down the table.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, absolutely.
it is a
And
good card, and it's like one of those. It's one of those cards where it's costs a quarter. Nobody needs it until they need it, but when you need it, it is the exact right tool.
exactly. And so, it's just sort of just to bring this back to the whole idea
Sorry,
of
I
Rule
just get
Zero.
excited when
Yeah.
I see like
No.
these cards. I'm like, oh man, your card. This would be so
Yeah.
good with the one card.
Okay. One more card I got to talk about because it's one of my favorite cards. A Crowan Horse in this deck is a
Mm,
house and a half.
I love this card.
Yeah. A Crowan Horse is 4 mana for an artifact creature horse. It's a 0/4 with Defender that says when a Crowan Horse enters the battlefield, an opponent gains control of it. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Now, you might be thinking, oh, well, why would I give that away? Well, what it does is it lets me guaranteed have something to ping every single round with Kelsian.
Yes,
Oh, so much fun.
and and when you read the way the text is written, you give this to somebody else. You are their opponent.
Yeah,
So
so
this
you
is
also
a
get something.
Trojan
Yeah,
horse story. You give them the horse, and they give you all your soldiers pouring out every turn.
it's great.
It's
Oh,
it's oh man, I really need to just put this into my soldiers deck, but it doesn't fit again. It doesn't fit in my theme because this is not a justice card. This is
mm,
a we're going to kill your city card.
yeah, exactly.
um,
Um,
but it is one of my favorite cards of all time.
it's good
And
stuff.
not gonna lie, wow, this Kelsey deck looks sweet. Man, I need to have you build me decks. What is going on?
Well, if you want to see the new hotness, I have an untested one that we're actually going to be filming with this Saturday. It's a Pramicon all walls combat tricks deck. Uh, if you want to find it on my Mox field, it's under rocking a rhyme that's right on time because it's tricky. Uh,
Get out, get
yeah,
out.
I gotta go. I gotta go. I can't believe I got that one in. But what it is it's just a whole bunch of creatures with Defender, Vent Sentinel,
Mm,
and that new tutor creature from Dominaria United,
the shield
Shield
guy.
Wall. Yeah, Shield Wall Sentinel. And then I've got something like 21 different combat tricks that I never cast on my creatures. I cast them on other people's creatures when they're going to combat. I'm playing control without ever removing creatures directly, without countering any spells, without doing any stacks aside from you have to attack in order around the table.
What the hell is this deck?
Yeah. I really hope it plays as good as it simulates because I've had a ton of fun simulating it.
I'm just
Basically,
looking at this
yeah.
thing. It literally is just like every wall on the planet that's in
Hmm.
these colors, except for a handful or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but it's what the. And you didn't. Oh, you did put Wingmantle Chaplain to good. That
I
card is
did.
that card is Nutter Butters.
It
Uh,
is.
but yeah, like righteousness,
Yep.
righteousness, the old reserve, like revised era junker rare. Like,
Mhm.
target blocking creature gets +7/+7, target blocking creature. So when
Right?
player B attacks player C, you're like, whoops. Boom.
Well, it's a real shame that your commander died there, isn't it?
Gosh. And yeah, sometimes they're like, yo, I need to attack you. Can you just chump block with that thing? They're like, yeah,
Mhm.
sure, whatever. Oh no. Oh no.
Exactly. Well,
This
don't get me
is
wrong, I did fill it in with stuff like High Alert, which allows,
well, yeah, you gotta
creatures
I mean, you have
with
to have
commander
some
to
things.
attack, right?
And then
Um,
Rashad
yep,
Yin Bashir, whatever. Yeah, no,
yep.
this deck looks sweet too. I mean, I think I question if this deck's playability is going to last up to how fun it is to read, but
Yeah.
because I've seen that with Walls decks, it's like,
I'm waiting to see how much fun it is to play, honestly.
yes,
Because the way it seems to play, just the few times I've run through it, is I basically put up my defenses and then I mess with other people, which is
mm,
exactly what I want to be doing. And my guess is that I probably get overwhelmed pretty easily.
yeah,
Um, the other half of it is that if this works and I'm able to vent Sentinel people to death, I think I tell that story for years.
yeah.
You know?
I think if you can like Vent Sentinel is another one that's like one of my favorite cards of all time. Needs a home. The only home is Pramicon.
Yep. Yep.
Oh god, did you know Pramicon was my preview for that year?
Really? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
for my old podcast commander, and that was the preview card we
Oh
got for that for Pramicon. And
yeah.
like we were looking at this like this is the weirdest card I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's like borderline an uncard, but like it just works.
It yeah, I mean there's nothing in here. I mean Aminatu is a little weirder than this, but
Yeah.
this and Aminatu are fair, fine. They're
Yeah.
just bizarre. They're
Exactly.
bizarre cards.
Unusual.
And they
And so
do yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so again, this is another deck that I think lets me play the villain. It lets me put a target on my back and do some really flashy stuff for the camera and then lose the game. But I get to do it doing what I want and guaranteeing I get to do what I want.
I love that there's like a whole column of just combat tricks here that cost like $1 for the entire stack.
Yeah,
Like
it's great.
you have the friggin' Keelan's Blessing from the Chinese intro decks or whatever that they put out,
Mhm.
which is like one of the jankiest, just bad giant growths ever put out.
Yeah, but
It
it's 1 mana and it's +2/+2 to target creature.
just
Good
does a
enough.
thing.
Yep.
Oh, E Honda.
Yep. Yep. No, I was looking through, and I specifically remember when I found E Honda building this deck. I put into Scryfall Oracle text search toughness rather than its power, right?
Mm.
And then E Honda pops up, and I read the second half of him, and I say, "Oh, if I ever actually have to attack, this is going to be glorious."
Whenever
So
E Honda Sumo Champion attacks, up to 100 target creatures get +0/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. It is
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. So
It
you
is
just get
if
to.
you can
Mhm.
Alpha Strike and all your walls are suddenly just
Yep,
huge. It's
exactly.
so stupid.
Oh, it's
God,
good
I love
stuff,
this deck. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
right?
I love
Yeah,
it, but it is look, this is the exact opposite of an Arcades wall deck. This is
exactly.
just like
You're not really trying to trick things until the very end of the game. You're not trying to get out of the cycle of being a walls deck until the game is done. And at that point, you can put in Rolling Stones, you can put in High Alert, pieces like that. I actually threw in a Rite of the Raging Storm just to make it so people would be punchier and we could get to the point where life totals were lower earlier. Rite of the Raging Storm being 3 red, red for an enchantment, which says creatures named Lightning Rager can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player creates a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Rager. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of the end step sacrifices
you
creature.
know what this card is? This card is just Sulfuric Vortex, but in pieces.
Exactly.
It's
And it's multiplayer friendly. I love
yeah,
it.
and it's 5 damage. That's no joke.
It really isn't. It's one of Jim's favorite pet cards. He advocates for it a lot because it makes games play quicker and be more interactive. It makes you make decisions about who you need to attack, whether you do attack,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
just
just
like
free
sometimes you
damage.
need to put a time limit on a game. This does that.
Exactly.
Also, you
Exactly.
know what I've noticed from the 3 decks that you've shown me today? Each of them uses one of the classes. Like
Hmm.
you had Paladin class in the Soldiers deck, you had fighter class in the Pinger deck, and then you
Yep,
have this one as cleric class.
you got
And
it.
I just want to say I appreciate that because I love those cards and I've been looking for homes for them, and I think they're fantastic, and people just aren't respecting them nearly enough.
I think if you really go and look through the suite of abilities that are on these cards, you're almost going to find some value on their first stage, no matter what, so long as some part of it is relevant to
Hmm.
your deck. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't play Paladin class in Assemble the Legion for the
Anthem.
non-creature spells cost more. I
Mm.
play it for the Anthem, but the
Yeah.
non-creature spells cost more is good incidental value.
Yes.
They're just really classy cards that do the kinds of things that most people want to be doing. I think they're I don't want to call them a staple by any means because they're not like fantastic or superlative, but they create a level of value for you to be using whenever you want to. And it gives you a mana sink on those turns where you just kind of brick.
They just feel like good, solid. They feel like what you want an enchantment to do.
Yeah.
They feel like the ideal version of an enchantment. As in, this sits here, it gives you incremental value every turn, or some nice, good static ability. It's not so threatening that they want to take it out, but it's definitely doing work for you.
Hmm.
I love that. I love that these cards just sit there, exist, and exist in an annoying enough way,
Yeah.
but it's gently annoying.
Exactly. It's not something that makes people scared of you. It doesn't attract removal. Honestly, if somebody ever removed cleric class from me, I think I'd be happy because I think I got the best deal of all time at that point.
Yeah, like that card is I don't honestly I don't know what it's doing in that deck. Like cuz that's like a good life gain card, but in a walls deck, why do you
So there's a sneaky number of walls that gain you life just for being walls. When they
Huh.
block, when they come into the battlefield, all sorts of stuff.
That's I guess you could just incidentally gain some juice out of that.
Yeah, and
That's
that's all it's there
wild.
for. Because I also think that I'm probably going to get attacked a lot and might not be
Mm,
able to block all the time. So,
that's fair. That's fair.
yeah.
That's
And
weird. Huh.
yeah. Any case, one of the things I know we wanted to talk about was how the folks at home could do
Yes.
something like this.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going to go next.
Yeah. Basically, the way I've done it, and I've talked about it a little bit already, is I first start with what is something that I want to make happen
Mm,
in a game of Magic, and the thing cannot be, oh, I win the game with X. That's not what we're looking for. The thing you want to be looking for is what's a unique ability. For the
mm,
Kelsey deck, it was the ability to get a single creature bigger by making it murder things. For this Walls deck, it was how can I play control without playing control.
mm,
For Assemble the Legion, it was how can I build a go wide deck without any creatures in it.
mm,
And so you find that challenge in your head that for your own gears is going to make them start turning.
mm,
And then you try to limit yourself as best you can to 3 or 4 different types of effects. And you write them down and you say, I'm going to go on Scryfall and I'm going to search rules text, creature, create token creature, but not on creatures, only on instants and sorceries.
sure.
And that's how you build it. You just go through and you add all the effects that you can find that are on theme, that work with the deck, that make it function. And you have such a density of the effects that you're looking for that you never have to worry about, oh, I didn't draw my silver bullet, because everything's your silver bullet.
Mm, mm. So, logistically speaking, when
Mhm.
you're playing a game like this, do you just treat it as if it was any commander, as in it goes back to the zone, you pay 2 more, you get it again?
You got it. That's it.
Fair.
All you got to do. One thing I actually brought up in Richmond was I had a friend, Carson C. Massive. You know
Yes.
Carson. Um, Carson asked, well, Alex, I don't really pack enchantment removal. I'm not sure I want to play it. I said, well, what if it's 3/3?
Hmm.
We'll make it a 3/3. It has no creature type. It just sits there on the board. It's a 3/3. He says, I think I'm okay with that. And I figure as long as we're breaking rules, why not break a few more? I mean, we're going to have stickers to put on them here in about 3 weeks, right? So why not?
I mean, that seems reasonable to me. It's like, look, if you can't deal with the enchantments, it's a 3/3 with a static ability that just shoots out soldiers.
Yep.
Give it defender, it won't attack,
Yeah.
whatever. It
I
just sits
never,
there.
I would never attack with it anyway.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and it's just these little compromises that logistically, when you go to talk to someone about it, you just say, okay, what's your concern? What are
And
your yeah.
yeah, it's a rule 0 deck already. It's like you've already established that we're going to be doing something that is different.
Hmm.
So let me make this as comfortable for you as I can since we are already okay with it being just a different game.
Exactly.
And I think that's I mean, I can see that there's definitely gonna be people out there who are not comfortable with that, and that's
Oh yeah.
fine. If you
Yeah.
don't wanna jam with this, that is don't ever feel that you're forced into
No.
playing this. Like,
No.
if somebody comes up to you and they're like, "Yo, you know what? I've got my icy manipulator deck," and you're like,
Mhm.
that's neat, but I not here for that." Nothing wrong with that. There's
No, not at all.
you're
And in fact, there's a card coming out in Dominaria United. It's an uncommon Boros character who is just make a soldier when you do anything. I can't remember what he does, but he's red white, and I'm probably going to put that in the box with Assemble the Legion so I can swap that out.
hmm.
So I'll have him in the command zone. I'll never cast him, and I'll just put Assemble the Legion in the 99.
I mean, that's a good like Kessler used to do that with his he had a planeswalker deck and he was like whenever somebody doesn't want to play Nahiri, I've got a backup that I can just throw. Oh yeah, Baird, the Argivian recruiter. At the
Mm,
beginning of your end step, if you got a creature with power greater than its base, get a 1/1 soldier or something.
yeah,
Just
that's the
to,
one.
yeah, exactly.
And so
Good
I'm going to
card.
go pick up a copy of that for 10 cents and have that in there as insurance in case someone doesn't want to play it. But I've got to be honest, I've played 20 games now, not with like my friends, and I don't think I've had anybody other than the few times where people have been like confused about what I was doing, or in that one case,
Sure.
like I said with Carson being concerned, where anybody's even said boo about it.
Mm.
So,
Now I can see like I think the trick here is that if you're building one of these decks, don't abuse this.
oh
Don't
no,
go out of your way to build some heinous, like, my commander's Winter Orb type of deck, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. One of the things we talked about on our show was my commander's Sol Ring, 5 color Sol Ring. Okay, man,
yeah.
whatever.
So, how do you decide what, like, when you've got Oslith as your commander, how do you decide what color identity is?
Well, all he did, according to Jim, is he sat down and he thought to himself, "What is the most interesting set of colors I can work with?"
And so, you just like when you sit down, part of your Rule Zero discussion, you're like, we're pretending this is a Demir card for the purpose of
Yep,
color identity. Every card in here fits Demir colors.
you got it.
So yeah, so like I think the biggest part of this is that it's a lot of self-imposed restrictions already
Hmm.
because that's what makes it work. If you
Yes,
don't have the self-imposed restriction, then you're just playing Canlander or some weird value pile. So you really
exactly.
have to you have to buy in. You have to buy
Yep,
into the conceit here that I am building a very very heavily theme locked deck. I'm putting these own restrictions on me, and I'm going to follow them to the T as if they were commander building instructions.
exactly. Because I can't remember the exact phraseology I used, but a while back when I was trying to explain to someone why you can't just suggest any random rule change to Commander and have it be accepted by the majority of people, is that Commander at its core is essentially deck building restrictions that are easily understood.
That's 100% what it is. It is we're building off of a shared assumption of deck building restrictions. We trust that everybody sitting at the table is going to be playing a 100 card singleton plus or minus. Everybody's going to like if your commander is green and blue, we know that the cards in there are going to be green, blue, and colorless. There's no tricks here,
Exactly.
and
And so
that's what makes it function.
exactly. And so if you've already got people that are primed for that mentality,
Like we
that
live in a
you
society, people.
yeah, exactly. You get them ready to say, "Hey, I've already got these decks put together this way. I understood that these deck building restrictions exist." And you have a 2 or 3 sentence pitch that includes, "Hey, I know I'm using an enchantment, but I didn't use any creatures, and it's all about making creatureless go wide work." Right?
Mm.
It's all about my Ozlith deck. I selected it for it to be blue black instead of 5 color or no color because I thought that would be the most interesting Voltron setup I could do.
Mm.
You have that hook that catches people's attention that makes them think, "Oh, well, what
And
does he have for that?"
you justify it by saying, "Look, I have put on as strict building restrictions as you have, and I'm following them." Because
Exactly.
if you don't, then they're just like, "How can I trust that you're not just going to be pulling out nonsense?" And it's
Exactly.
like, "Well, look,
And that's why when we were discussing it, the example of 5 color Sol Ring, we don't think that works. We think that might be an interesting format of its own, where you just have you know prismatic decks that always have access to Sol Ring. Yeah, go build for that. Go try that out.
one
But
of
it's not
the hypotheticals
Commander.
I was discussing with an RC member once is,
Yeah.
they suggested like, what if you just had Soul Ring in your command zone? Everybody starts with a Soul Ring, and or the ability to cast a Soul Ring at any time. If it dies, you don't have a Soul Ring anymore. It goes to the graveyard like anything else, but you just have one at your leisure, just
Hmm.
to take that out of the equation of no, it didn't start with a Soul Ring.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that seems
Um,
fine. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's equal. Because
Yeah.
really, the biggest problem that you run into trying to get Rule Zero decks into pods is that people feel like they didn't have the opportunity to do what you're doing because they've shown up to Commander Night. They might know you, they might not. It doesn't really matter. You're showing up with something that's not street legal. In their opinion, regardless of whatever else happens, you need to get them from they're doing something that's not street legal to they're doing something that's not street legal, but it probably races at the same speed,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
You can't just show up with a tricked out supercar to local drag race night under 55cc and expect people to be happy about that.
Well, that's I think the entirety of pub stomping, right? Like, or of
Yeah.
like why CEDH has such a grumpy
Yep.
reaction sometimes is
Yeah.
because people feel like we were building under one assumption, and you went
Hmm.
and changed your mind, and now we're not playing the same game anymore, and it's not fair. And
Exactly.
that's what the disparity, the anger comes from. It's from disparity. It's
Yes.
from like feeling like, hey man, I was following the rules, and you're doing something else, and they're like, yeah, well, I'm also following the rules, just very specific. I'm like,
Mhm.
we understand, but you get the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you got to be cautious with these decks. But I'm looking at this power level of this deck. It doesn't seem unfair to me. It doesn't seem like you're trying to pull a fast one here. It is very thematic. It's very locked in place, and you definitely have power restrictions there. Like, this seems totally reasonable to me. I love this
Yeah.
idea. I,
And I got to be honest, I think I'm one of the more spiky people I know in terms of how I actually sit down to play the game.
mm,
Um, and it's always been satisfying to me to play these. I mean, I don't know if this Walls deck is going to be as fun as Kelsey and Assemble the Legion, but the idea of only needing to have some draws in my Highlander deck, and I'm always going to have some expression of here I have this thing, it pings things to death, or here I have this thing, it spits out tokens for me, and not have to worry about the vagaries of a quote unquote well built casual deck that might or might not get me there in any given game. I like that a lot because one of the things that I really appreciate about CEDH is our suite of guarantees. Right, we're always going to have access to certain things because of the density of tutors, the amount of cards we draw, the amount of different options that we have available to us that all push us towards one thing, and that thing is winning in CEDH. In these decks and in these expressions, the thing is different. It's it's a true this is the thing deck because I've built it in a way that I can't help but do the thing if I'm playing the game at all. And so that's what I just really appreciate about this style.
love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Man, what a beautiful deck. This is like this seriously, I'm just looking at this list and it's like it makes me so happy. It's like everything I want. It's just it's so perfect. This is like, I wish I had done this years ago. Like, I love
Mhm.
this. I'm definitely gonna build this deck. I'm not gonna lie. This is just
Awesome.
like, I mean, I might change your lands a bit because
Oh, please.
I need
Yeah.
to have my Keldor outposts.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Please do.
also I like that like you got two duels in here.
Yeah.
That's like,
I, I mean that's something else I've been doing a lot more with my deck building recently. Is I've been cutting fetches heavily. I've been cutting quote unquote good duels quite a bit. I'm leaning very heavily on the bond lands a lot of
mm,
the time. And I'm also just not building 4 color piles. Like even the Kelsian deck at 3 colors is about as aggressive as I want to get. Right?
yeah. Like, I think honestly, the more I think about it, and this is like hottake.com right here, I think that Commander is best when you're playing between 1 and 3 colors.
Yeah.
I think once you get to 4 and 5, you lose so much cohesion. You get into just like serious full on value piles of just like, and at that point, you might as well just be going for the turbo nos or whatever,
Right.
because what are we doing? Like, you just got all the colors. You can do whatever you want. Great.
Exactly. I think there are ways. I think there are ways to build 4 and 5 color decks that are thematic that do have these sorts of things. I've seen some like Goshen Tie of Life's Origin decks floating around. Is it Goshen Tie of Life's Origin?
Yes.
The 5 color. Yeah.
The five
Anyway,
color shrines. Yeah.
that they're not like just good stuff piles. They're thematic. They're shrines. You know, slivers can be the same thing to a certain extent. But the problem is unless you have a really again, unless you have a really good theme to restrict yourself around, it does end up just being like, oh, here's my Kadama's Reach, here's my Cultivate, yay, we did it. I have all the
Yay.
best. I have all the best counters. I have all the best removal, and then you're just back in CADH land or turbo casual.
Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, that's fine. That's fair. But we already have
Yeah,
decks for that.
exactly.
Like,
And my point is a lot of content, a lot of content is based around getting people to that level, to build the best Prosper deck, to build the most efficient Goshen Tie of Life's Origin. And you can go and find that. And if that rings your bell and that's what your playgroup wants to do, you've got the content for it. I'm putting these together for me, and I apparently people like you, Shivam,
Dude,
who,
you know I love this stuff.
yeah.
Like,
And so I just kind of appreciate that it allows me to do what I want to do with a larger group of people that I'm traditionally used to playing games with.
mm. I mean, you were coming into the power band that I live in, right? Like,
Mhm.
this is the world I want, which is why I'm also saying that you should be running Daru Encampment in this deck. Because,
Gosh.
dude, have you seen Daru Encampment?
I'm reading it right now, but I'm pretty sure I remember it from when I was in middle school.
Yeah, it's a card from Lorwyn. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's a land that says tap to add one colorless to your pool,
Yes.
or white and tap. Target soldier gets +1/+1 till end of turn.
Oh, that's great.
It is
Oh,
about as medium a card has ever been made. It is just fine.
but it would do so well in this deck. You're
It would
absolutely
do
right.
so well exactly for you.
Oh my goodness.
It lives
Yeah.
in the exact band of power that your deck wants to be
Yeah.
at. And it does. It's like, it's not
That's really
overwhelming.
tempting.
It's just
Yeah,
cute. It's just
exactly.
cute. It's a little
Just
hut.
cute.
It's a Kithkin hut. Come on.
You just get to go get a little bit stronger. It's good
Yeah,
stuff.
I love that. I love that so much. Ah, man, this deck is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing it. And just this whole idea is exactly what I want out of Commander. That's like
Yeah.
what you're saying this whole time around is like, man, that's the Commander I want. That's like the world I want to live in, where we can just sit there and play full on weirdo themed decks that are not just meme decks, but they have a plan. Your decks have a plan, a purpose. You have a way to win. You have an idea in mind,
Mhm.
and so it's like if you took my unfiltered ramblings and then focused them into something good, but stayed at the same power level that I'm talking at.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, and
Yeah.
that's like that's everything I want to see out of this format, and it makes me
Yeah.
so happy to see that. Especially coming from someone like you who's so just like,
Yeah.
just intrinsically tied to playing a kind of magic that I find unapproachable.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
And
"Look, you can apply those same tools and make cards that I wanna play too."
exactly. And I really, it really gladdens my heart to hear this from you, because I've spent a lot of time trying to get to the point where I don't get bored, or I don't get annoyed, or I don't get frustrated trying to play quote unquote bad casual decks.
Mhm.
And I think this approach, if you're listening and you're a spike and you're listening to casual magic and you think, oh gosh, I don't know how to build, I don't know how to play with these friends, I don't know how to go into this LGS that's like very anti CDH or anti nitro casual. How do I do it? You do it by finding more restrictions that speak to you. You do it by sitting down and saying, here's the plan I want to make. And even if it's a rule zero plan, if you do this well enough, if you restrict yourself from putting in things like anointed procession, you can put together a deck that people are going to enjoy playing against and they're going to be curious about. And even if you play the villain, like I do with my Kelsey deck, they're not going to be mad about it. They're going to remember, oh, I'm so happy I overcame that evil, evil deck.
Yes.
And that's
I
what you
would have
want
a
to do.
hard time not putting Anointed P in here, but I
Yeah.
would. I would avoid it for the purposes because you've sold me on this, like, that card and, like, Cathar's Crusade would elevate this to out of a cute, interesting gimmick into just, ugh, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't
Well,
want that.
basically, one thing that I've talked about in the past is there are sort of three pillars of power, in my opinion.
Mm,
It's consistency, efficiency, and intent, right?
mm,
And so the
mm,
intent of these decks is very clear. I want a casual deck that always does what it does. It's very efficient at doing it, but it doesn't win the game fast.
mm.
And the consistency is super high because it's a super dense with all the things I want to be doing.
Right.
The problem with putting in Cathar's Crusade or Anointed Procession in a deck like this, honestly, Divine Visitations on like the
Yeah,
chopping
Visitation
block
is
for me.
definitely, like, that's pushing it for this
Exactly,
deck for me.
exactly. But on the other hand, it's basically one of my only big 5
Ye
mana, okay, I can start winning the game now
Yeah, I was
spells.
gonna say, I'm like, you need some kind of overrunning type thing, and you don't have one. I think
Exactly.
I think Visitation without those others, Anointed Procession and Friends, is fine
Yeah.
because it doesn't do anything unto itself. It requires you to have all this other setup, And like you said, you need a finisher. You don't have you don't have like an overrun.
No, I don't. And so that's part of why Visitation stayed. But the reason that things like Cathar's Crusade and Anointed Procession stayed out is those games, when I get those,
Hmm.
goes from this is a fine casual level, we're all having a good time, things are happening, to oh no, Alex won.
Yes.
And there's no in between. And that's part of the thing that we talked to with that consistency, is that would actually lower the consistency of what I'm actually aiming for with this deck. And that's why I leave them out.
Right. That said, though, like I would probably still put something like a Nomad's Assembly in here
Sure.
because I just like doubling my tokens.
Yeah.
But
No,
or
and,
like,
and there's nothing
Finale of
wrong with
Glory or
that.
something. Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but like 'cause I think this kind of deck does need some way to push through. But
Yeah.
I think there was a one card that they revealed in the Warhammer deck that is like a way to get soldier tokens back after a wrath or something like that. Or
I
not
don't
soldier
remember
tokens.
off a hand, but I think I
Yeah,
remember
I
what
don't
you're
know.
talking about.
I mean, they reveal 7,000 cards. How are we going to remember them
Yeah.
all? And they do them all at once. So we're just like, there's no Defenders of Humanity. Defenders of Humanity X2 and a white. It creates X2 creature tokens with vigilance, and then X2 and a white. Exile this card. Create X2 creatures with vigilance. Only if you have no creatures in play and during your turn.
Yeah.
So
Great.
it would be perfect for your deck. But
Yeah.
frankly, your deck is perfect. Like no notes. It's excellent. Um,
Thanks, you.
Man, I love that. But okay, my dude, if folks wanted to find you and hear more of your content, where could they go?
Well, absolutely. Well, my name's Alex. I am a member of the Spike Feeders. We're a Canadian Magic the Gathering and Flesh and Blood channel that focuses a little bit on how you can play the game in different ways. We play everything from high power casual to super CDH and even some Rule Zero nonsense, as we talked about a little bit today. We do combo explanation videos, both how you can play them and how you can stop them, along with some just podcast content that's in video format. You can find me specifically if you really want to look at some interesting tweets. I don't recommend it, but it's Spike Feeder Alex on Twitter. And I'd be happy to see you over there. In terms of other things, you can catch Jim all over the place as both a member of the RC and a pretty consistent stream guest.
Yeah. Man, that's so weird. Jim being like Jim going from just being my CAG buddy colleague to suddenly my boss is like, this is going to be a weird one. But spoilers, I'm going to be having a forthcoming episode where both Jim and Olivia will be on together so that we can sit and talk about what it's like to have them suddenly get giant growth into the stratosphere. It's going to be neat. I love those two, and I'm so glad that they're going to be shepherding the future of Commander. Like I couldn't imagine better people to do it. They're so thoughtful and so just incredibly aware of what this format means to people, and I'm just really excited for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can find me at Gearboard Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Thursdays. Thank you, EK. And remember, my friends, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you